VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at VCYAmerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thanks for tuning in today on Crosstalk here on the VCY America Network. My name is Jim Schneider. It seems that many American citizens have a great concern, a growing concern over the direction our nation is heading. People regularly are wondering, are we being told the truth? Do we really know what's going on? And there's been this growing skepticism that's been developing on the part of citizens all across this country regarding the media, their coverage of issues pertaining to our present administration and all the policies that are going forth. It has seemed to so many that network media just is nothing more than a public relations firm for the White House. Could it be that the media is being manipulated? Well, according to our guest today, we might be seeing a Chicago-style presidency at work. It's our privilege to have with us Floyd Brown. He's a political innovator, media commentator, writer, and speaker. He's the chairman of the Western Center for Journalism, which is a vigorous watchdog that keeps a check on government abuse in the media. The center believes openly in strong public debate, which requires quality journalism and reporting. He was also involved in launching the impeachment movement against former President Clinton, has organized many national campaigns, including the effort to secure the confirmation of Judge Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. Floyd, thanks for joining us today here on Crosstalk.
It's great to be with you, Jim.
We're going to take a look at a number of issues today, but let's begin with Bob Woodward. Many are familiar with him, a journalist, been around the block a few times, certainly not a novice in his coverage of political matters, but tell our listeners a little bit about him and the allegations that have come forth regarding his being threatened by the White House.
Yeah. Well, Bob Woodward is, a fixture of the Washington media scene. I mean, he became famous when he was actually a young man, a reporter for the Washington Post, and he's really the reporter that's credited with bringing down Richard Nixon for his reporting about Watergate. He dug and dug on Watergate, and since that time, he has been incredibly active covering every administration, producing a book about every 8 to 10 months, and some of the most interesting stories that come out of D.C. often come out of Bob Woodward's writing. And right now, with the sequester happening, he was reporting on this, following it very closely. He actually wrote a book about the budget battle, and he accused the president of moving the goalposts, which anyone that's been closely watching this, you realize, yes, the president has moved the goalposts, because at first, this was about spending cuts. The Republicans gave him one tax increase, but then almost immediately upon the heels of one tax increase, he wants another tax increase, and he doesn't want to deal with the spending questions. Mm-hmm. So I think when Woodward did this, he received tremendous grief from the administration. Gene Sperling, one of the White House officials, actually berated him on the phone, according to reports, actually was screaming at him on the phone, wrote a email to him actually apologizing for screaming at him on the phone, where he said that Bob Woodward was going to regret taking this position. Woodward felt that he was being intimidated, or at least there was an attempt to intimidate him, and that's where all of this got started.
So what did he mean by the word regret? You're going to regret reporting on this.
Well, I mean, the word is, I think, pretty clear. He was going to regret it either because access was going to be cut off to Bob Woodward, or some other actions were going to be taken by this administration against him that would make him regret reporting the story in the way he was reporting it.
Has there been any proof or anything to come forward that has substantiated this account?
Well, I mean, this is in an email that's been released.
So there is hard copy of it.
Clearly substantiates it. So, I mean, the coverage is pretty clear. I mean, he did use the word regret in the email. Now, Bob Woodward, I'm sure, wasn't intimidated by it because he is someone with a history of dealing with political figures, and political figures often try to intimidate their opponents. But I don't think he was intimidated. But I think there are other younger reporters that, given the same situation, would have been intimidated.
Do you believe that this was an isolated incident with Woodward?
No, I don't. In fact, my new book called Obama's Enemies List, How Barack Obama Intimidated America and Stole the Election, really is a account of 4 years full of different people who have been targeted by the administration and who are on, in essence, an enemies list. And Bob Woodward is just the latest of those.
What do you mean by targeted?
Well, all kinds of different actions. I mean, I first got started following this when he first ran. I was placed on a website called Fight the Smears, where they listed, these people that, quote unquote, were trying to smear Barack Obama. And after I was listed on that website, I began to receive threatening phone calls, death threats, and other things that were directed at me personally. And I know other people have suffered the same thing. And it was not so disconcerting to me, but it was really disconcerting to my wife, who was at home and receiving a lot of these phone calls.
You're the chairman of the Western Journalism Center, and you've been monitoring, you've been reporting on government for some time. You've seen the different administrations come and go. Open the eyes of our listeners as to how this administration operates compared to what you've witnessed previous.
Well, one of the things is the media business has dramatically changed in the 30 years that I've been involved in watching Washington. When I first got involved, many of the reporters were very senior, mature people like David Broder, who's since passed away, or Jules Witkover, who's since passed away. And the media business, as it has come under financial pressure, has retired out and gutted the top level of its newsrooms. And so now the reporters generally dealing with different agencies and different political leaders, and even on Capitol Hill, are, I think, very junior people. They're people in their 20s and 30s, and when you're young, you don't have the life experience or the same viewpoint as someone like a Bob Woodward might have, and you're much more susceptible to intimidation, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. For example, I mean, your career hasn't been made yet. Threats of, we're not going to give you access to people to interview in the White House, or we're going to freeze you out of information, will have a much greater impact on someone who's young than a mature reporter like Woodward. And as these media companies have gotten their margins compressed, and they've become less profitable, and they've become, smaller businesses overall because of technology and the competition of the Internet, they have, I think, really taken a hatchet to their newsrooms, and that's one of the reasons we don't get the quality reporting we should get.
Do you think that Woodward's incident is going to come to anything, or is it just going to fall by the wayside as we've seen so many other matters go?
No, I think the Woodward incident is going to pretty much go by the wayside. But the whole budgetary questions and the sequester, they are just coming into focus, because the sequester is nothing compared to the big budget crisis that's just around the corner. On March 21st, the Congress is going to want to take their Easter recess, which they take every year, and if they don't have a continuing resolution by that Easter recess, the sequester will be nothing, because they won't have budgetary authority for most of the major agencies. You have to realize the Senate hasn't passed a budget in years.
Yeah.
I mean, these members of Congress just haven't done their job, and at the same time, I don't believe the administration has dealt with them in good faith. And so it's extremely hard to negotiate with someone when they don't approach you in good faith. So you have a tremendous amount of dysfunction in Washington. And it's going to only get more serious as this month progresses. So.
Well, yeah, and on that issue, I saw a news story come forth just a short time before this program indicating that the House leadership is trying to rush through this continuing resolution to keep the government funding for the remainder of fiscal 2013, and this coming at a direct violation of their pledge that the American people were going to have access to bills posted at least 72 hours before voting on them. And it appears that they are going to be coming together yet this afternoon and trying to rush through this 269-page continuing resolution.
Yeah. Promises made by people in Washington, D.C., both Republican and Democrat, are usually worth about as much as the piece of paper they're written on. I mean, politicians break more promises than they keep, and it's sad, but I think our politics has been turned to the point where we have government for the government, by the government, instead of government for the people, by the people. And when you have a permanent establishment, and when congressmen go back to Washington, D.C., and they spend an entire career in that city, and people should make no mistake about it. There is a reason that Washington, D.C. is by far the wealthiest city in America. I mean, of the zip codes that have the highest incomes, they are all clustered around Washington, D.C. There's a reason for that, and it's because they're basically able to take money from all the rest of the country. I mean, you can't find one product. I've said to people before, I said, go to Washington, D.C., and if you can find one manufacturing firm, if you can find one thing that's actually made there, my hat's off to you, because I've never been able to find it. Instead, it's an extremely wealthy city that makes its living basically as a parasite on the rest of the country. And so as government has mushroomed and grown, and now it's part of every aspect of our life, from health care to, what kind of car you drive, what the mileage of the car is, every product in your kitchen. I mean, they micromanage everything. And as they have done that, they have I think, really done America a big disservice.
Floyd Brown is our guest here today on Crosstalk, chairman of the Western Center for Journalism, author of the newly released book, Obama's Enemies List, subtitled How Barack Obama Intimidated America and Stole the Election. Folks, we're talking about this Chicago-style presidency and a journalist here threatened by the White House. But, folks, we're going to probe a little bit further into the sequester and the apparent goal by this administration to make the sequester hurt as much as possible. We'll be back in just 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, creation researcher and scientist at the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, it seems that cows are well designed to eat grass, aren't they?
Yes, indeed they are, Chris. With multiple stomachs to allow full digestion, it's all a marvelous case of engineering. But it's also true that sometimes cows eat meat. A friend of mine on a ranch tells of a drought which caused all the grass to die, and next the rabbits died. The cattle had only one option. They would eat any dead, dried rabbits they could find. I'm sure they would have preferred nice green grass, but that was not an option. Neither was starving to death for them. Here's the point. God has designed each animal type to be able to survive in whatever conditions. This type of adaptation has nothing to do with evolution, of course, but it's perfectly compatible with creation. Chris, God did a great job, a very good job of creation. back in Genesis.
This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for going back to Genesis.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and yes, a journalist said to be threatened by the White House. You're going to regret reporting on that. Is this a Chicago-style presidency? Well, we're talking with Floyd Brown, a political innovator and media commentator. He's the author of the book Obama's Enemies List, chairman of the Western Center for Journalism. Do you think Chicago-style presidency is too strong a term?
No. I mean, Barack Obama grew up in Chicago politics, and as we all know, Chicago politics are rough and tumble, and there's always been, a real hard edge to it, and they've brought that same edge to Washington.
Let's talk about the sequester just a bit, because we are knowing that the amount of money we're talking about here in the billions is really a drop in the bucket to what we're spending. And I mean, here we had John Kerry yesterday or day before visiting with a Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, saying, "Oh, America's giving you $250 million, good faith here toward your democracy," and so on. Yet we have to have, it's like we're told all the critical things that are going to happen to America with the sequester, long lines at the airport and all these kinds of things. Do you believe it's the goal of this administration to use this as a means for their own political end?
Well, yeah, that's very obvious. We all heard that there was a tremendous amount of fear-mongering before the sequester, telling us it was going to be a great catastrophe and that, the police weren't going to be able to, answer 911 calls and the fire departments were going to be cut and the TSA was, going to be cut way back and we were going to have long lines at the airport. First of all, everyone listening needs to understand one fact, and that is, in 2013, the federal government of the United States will have more money than it's ever had in its entire history. Okay? The amount of revenue going to D.C. goes up every single year. They have more money. The problem is, they can't seem to live amongst that growing money. And so actually, the truth is that nothing's really being cut. All we're doing is slowing the rate of growth. And in Washington, they call slowing the rate of growth in spending a budget cut. Mm-hmm. Now, when a business has financial problems, what do? They cut back, but the areas that they cut back usually are never to impact the customers because they need their customers. The federal government under Obama's leadership has done the exact opposite. It said, you know what, we got some budgetary problems, so why don't we maximize the heartache and problems and difficulties of our customers? Why don't we make their lives miserable? And then they'll give us more money, which, is just it's antithetical to everything that's American, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm understanding here that the Washington Times had obtained an email sent out Monday by Charles Brown, an official with the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service office in Raleigh, North Carolina, asking if there was any latitude in spreading the sequester cuts across the region and lessening the impacts like on fish inspections. Officials in Washington replied that whatever he does, he needs to make sure he doesn't contradict what we said the impact would be. And that tells me here, Floyd, that the Obama administration is saying all these horror things that we said would happen, we are going to make sure that those things happened, and no matter what the cost.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, the Washington Post had an article 2 days ago where they said that this was completely political and that the goal of Obama is to get rid of the Republican Congress. he believes that if he can maximize people's pain for the next 2 years, there'll be a change in Congress. He'll get Nancy Pelosi back as Speaker, and then he'll have 2 years at the end of his presidency to go hog wild and do whatever he wants to do. And so
I thought he was doing that now.
Focused on is on changing Congress. That's why it's so difficult for Congress to deal with them, because they're negotiating with someone who's approaching those negotiations in bad faith.
A constant campaign going on.
Constant campaign, looking for a political advantage, and not trying to solve the problems.
We talked about the Woodward incident, and I'm wondering if what your observation is, if this is limited to the media. I mean, I saw a story recently where a U.S. Army is said to have sent out an email to their some 6,000 employees with a subtext that said, "Don't criticize President Obama or any political party to members of the press." And what was interesting is that the email said that if people agree to be interviewed by the media, that they are sure that they are expressing their own personal opinion and that is not that of the Army. They're to avoid giving any answer, though, that might be perceived as criticism of the commander-in-chief, and being reported that even civilian employees received this communication. I mean, to me, that seems like intimidation is going beyond to the media aspect, the Woodward incident, but wow, down to the military and where else?
Well, yes. I mean, there has been more grief targeted at individuals, and it's just the start. I mean, for example, they want registration of firearms. Then they're going to have a list of firearms owners, and they'll have people that they can target. One of the things they've said is they want to make sure that no one with any mental illness, for example, owns a firearm. Well, the question is somebody who's been depressed, might have been depressed, but have been treated for that. Maybe they took Prozac or Zoloft. Does that mean they can't own a firearm? Well, the government is so overreaching and so powerful and so involved in everybody's life that they now can sit at their computer terminals and call up a list of all Americans who've ever taken Prozac. Why? Because they have all their medical records. They cross-tab that with registered gun owners, and then they have a list of people they can go after. That is the type of targeting that I'm talking about when I say the government now has an enemies list. And you have to realize that the Department of Homeland Security has issued numerous reports where they've said that the terrorists they're really concerned about are people who might believe in the Constitution, might believe in God, and they're targeting people of traditional American values, and that's why it's so frightening to me.
Floyd, if this is left unchecked, where might it lead? Well,
potentially could lead to, real tyranny and, sadly to say, a police state. I mean, right now, as we talk, Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky, is filibustering the nomination of John Brennan. Mr. Brennan has been head of the drone program. Well, the Attorney General just said yesterday in a letter to Mr. Paul that it would be okay for drones to kill Americans on American soil. And I don't know if that doesn't frighten you. I don't know what does. But if they believe they have the justification to, without trial, kill Americans using drones on American soil, that is an administration out of control.
Yeah. Folks, frightening indeed, and it goes beyond that. I mean,
if I was just listening to me, I would say this guy is off the wall because this stuff can't be true. Sometimes I feel like I'm in an Alice in Wonderland world because things that I never thought I would see in my lifetime are absolutely true.
And yet, all along the campaign trail, we kept hearing about openness and transparency.
Yeah, no, it's just it's doublespeak is what it is.
Yeah.
Say one thing, do another. That's why I always say with politicians, never listen to what they say. Only watch what they do. And
folks, I mean, we just scraped the very tip of the iceberg here when we talk about all the stonewalling and issues going on, whether it be Fast or Furious or the true cost and the true plan for the Obamacare, the implementation, perhaps the cross-reference check between mental illness that are reported through the record-keeping, electronic record-keeping with Obamacare, and the gun registry, the Benghazi incident, and on, Floyd, the list goes.
Yeah, it does, and all I can say is that the country has changed dramatically in the 4 years Barack Obama's been president. Dramatically. I mean, he told us he wanted to change it dramatically. He told us he didn't like how things were in America, and he wanted change. But frankly, I never thought it would go this far.
Folks, you're listening to Crosstalk. Floyd Brown is our guest today. Floyd, you've put out this book recently on Obama's enemies list. Tell us about it. How can our listeners obtain it?
Well, it's available at bookstores, Amazon.com. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. There's a number of different ways you can get it, but one of the easiest ways is to go to my own website, westernjournalism.com, and you'll find it easily there. So, and if you don't have the money to buy the book, you can actually subscribe to our daily email. We give that away absolutely free at westernjournalism.com. Your alternative news every day, 7 days a week.
westernjournalism.com. And for those who've never been to the site, what will they find there?
They're going to find the news like they've never seen it before. We cover all of these issues, from Fast and Furious to the influence of George Soros on the administration, the background of many of the hardcore leftists that are surrounding Barack Obama. You'll get all of this information at westernjournalism.com.
Well, folks, I'd like to open our phone lines here today to give you opportunity to make your comment, ask a question of our guest here today, Floyd Brown, as we, in essence, talk about a Chicago-style presidency. We have seen a journalist threatened by the White House, presumably not an isolated incident. But our phone number here to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. In light of what's happened with Bob Woodward, do you believe that any other journalist might come forth and say, yeah, me too?
Well, yeah, in fact, Lanny Davis already has. I mean, Lanny Davis was a fixture in the Clinton administration. He's another liberal like Woodward, but he said that basically he's been intimidated also or pressured. So this is not some isolated incident.
And we also find that there are reporters who simply will not be called upon at White House press conferences because of the types of questions, the journalistic skills that they'll utilize?
Yeah, yes. I mean, if one of the most ironic things is the questions are vetted ahead of time for most of these encounters between Obama and the press, so that he actually knows what questions are going to be asked, and clearly they pick and choose the reporters that are most friendly to their positions.
Again, folks, Floyd Brown is our guest here, and from Western Journalism Center, the website, westernjournalism.com. You'll find a plethora of news stories and issues there on the site, and you can get aboard and receive their daily emails, their regular emails that go forth to keep you informed and abreast of the news and give you a different perspective than you'll get from your networks as you put on the news in the evening. That is, if you put their news on in the evening.
Yeah, and it's all free too. I mean, we like to make this information available, and so we work hard to make sure there's no expense incurred.
We're going to go right to the phone lines after our break. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
The basis of scientific research is to find the truth, and scientists, of all people, are supposed to have open minds and be willing to look at all the evidence. However, history has told us that once an idea has become entrenched, even scientists find it difficult to accept anything that deviates from the idea. This is now the case with evolution, and the theory of evolution is now a dogma. Refuting evolution has now been taken to a new level. In the book, Evolution Impossible, Dr. John Ashton provides some of the most compelling and authoritative rebuttals of evolution today. Chapter by chapter, in straightforward language, he provides 12 compelling reasons why evolution is false. He uses discoveries in genetics, biochemistry, geology, radiometric dating, and other scientific disciplines to explain why the theory of evolution is but a myth. Evolution Impossible is available from VCY America for a donation of $17 or more by calling 1-800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network, and we're speaking today with Floyd Brown from the Western Journalism Center, and Western Center for Journalism, I should say, and check out their site there at westernjournalism.com. Let's get to the phone lines here today to hear from across the nation. We're going to begin in Lake Delton. Carl, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, may the Holy Spirit of God bless both of your ministries and keeping the information flowing about what's going on. You know, the sequester thing, they just allocated $1.8 million for 20 F-15 jets, 200 M1 Abrams tanks to Egypt, which will ultimately be used against Israel.
That went far beyond $8 million, Carl.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really shocking when you look at, they claim that there's no money, and yet Kerry's handing it out hand and fist as he travels around the world.
Thank you.
It's ridiculous.
Carl, thanks for your comment.
Hey, let me just say, Carl, I covet your prayers. Thank you. We need your prayers, and I really appreciate the fact that you and others are praying for us.
To Pewaukee, Wisconsin. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, I would just like to bring up the point on how the cuts are affecting our military. It's funny that it started with just their basic having hot meals every day, and my boys are both serving, and there's so many men that supposedly we're not in a war anymore, but they're out on the front lines and they can't even get a hot meal. And then the rations that they do get, if they have working dogs, they have to share with their animals because we're not even providing food for these guys and their animals that are working.
Floyd, do you have any information on this?
I know that things are not good on the front lines, and they should be much better. I mean, it's appalling the way they're partying at the White House. He's going on all these exclusive golf vacations. Michelle Obama at taxpayer expense is flying out to be part of the Academy Awards when our soldiers on the front lines are having these kind of problems. I mean, it's just appalling. As we all know, George W. Bush decided that while we were at war, he wasn't going to play golf. Well, this president sure is.
Caller, go ahead.
Yeah, and they won't even admit that we're still in a war. It's just so sad, morale, and the treatment of our men that volunteer to go and serve.
Well, I think it's part of his plan to change America, to hollow out our military forces, and he's cutting places that need to be bolstered, while at the same time bolstering things that should be cut.
Yeah, thanks for the call. And I saw the other day at least a photo of the large number of aircraft carriers in at our eastern shore that are not allowed out there. Never in our history have we had so many aircraft carriers docked. These things are astounding. Let's go to Wayne in Gregory, South Dakota. You're on the air.
Hi. I was wondering what your guest knows about when Obama ran for the first election. He had talked about some kind of a domestic military force equal to funding and material and everything as our standing military, and then that just kind of has all been forgotten about as far as what you hear about it. I was wondering what your guest knows about that.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's only been forgotten by those that aren't paying attention. Yes, Barack Obama called for a civilian force, and he's basically built that force at the Department of Homeland Security. And if you've been following the Department of Homeland Security, just the other day, I think they bought 200 light armored tanks. They have bought enough built bullets to kill every American 5 times, and they've just created this huge armory and armament at the Department of Homeland Security. That is his domestic army.
But what about the sequester? Doesn't that cut all those funds out of there?
I don't think it cuts all those funds out of there. I think these budgets have gone up so much that, first of all, the sequester really doesn't cut funds anywhere except at the Defense Department, and so no, I think he's going to continue to build his I don't want to call it a private army, but his domestic army. I think he's going to continue to do that.
One more question, if I could. What do you foresee? How long do we have as far as before the failure of our economy, before the dollar just totally tanks and we go into a kind of a economic collapse?
Well, I mean that's a question that I don't think I'm qualified to answer, but clearly I think that the economic policies that have been followed by this administration and by the Federal Reserve under Ben Bernanke, who Obama appointed or reappointed, have been very dangerous to the value of the dollar. And frankly, I think there is going to be some kind of a collapse. Picking the day, the hour, it's something I just can't do.
Appreciate your call here today. And right now, the U.S. debt clock showing the debt per citizen, $52,831, every man, woman, and newborn child today.
Yeah, and that's just the direct debt. There are liabilities that the country has in the way of pensions and Medicare liabilities that far, far outstretch that.
Let's go next to, Mike calling from Waukesha. You're on the air.
Yes, sir. First of all, I want to pray for you that you're a brave person. I just want to make a comment, and I'm going to ask you a quick question here. With freedom of speech and freedom of the press, how can this administration bully and intimidate all these reporters that when they ask relevant, important questions that they feel threatened, like they have to hide something? With this coming global fiscal meltdown that we're going to have, and the government seems to be buying up all this artillery and all this ammo, I mean, is it very possible during this administration, you feel, with all these signs, that we're going to have martial law inevitably?
Well, it's hard to know what's going to happen inevitably. What we do know, or what I know as a Christian, is that there is going to come a time when Satan will run amok in the entire globe, and I think he is right now. And we just have to be dependent upon our Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, to carry us through difficult times, and to hope that He shields our families and protects us in difficult times. I definitely see difficult times ahead. I see real economic problems, but whether or not it will end in martial law, I think that remains to be seen.
Thank you.
But all of the factors have been pulled together to allow for the first time in our history martial law to actually be enforced. I mean, in the past, America's never had the infrastructure of a police state, and actually now they do, because they have so much information on every single individual, and all of that's appended to these gigantic databases that are maintained by these government agencies. They know our telephone calls. If we, they know our emails. They know our medicines. They know everything about us. So, for the first time, that infrastructure of Big Brother actually exists.
Thank you, Mike, for your call here today. Floyd, let me ask you this. There have been these emails circulating about the government having asked military people applying for military or other positions as to whether or not they would be willing to turn their guns on U.S. citizens. Is there any validity to that you know of?
I cannot verify that myself. I've looked into it, but I can't verify it.
Okay. Our telephone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Our next caller from Joplin, Missouri. And Gina, you're on the air.
Hi. So thanks for taking my call. Mm-hmm. I am a new listener. Just turned on the radio like 10 minutes ago. I had a question about freedom of speech. I heard something about you were saying that whenever the media, was talking to the military people, if this military person is allowed to express his own opinion and not that of the military, he's not allowed to criticize.
Right. You can have your opinion, but just don't criticize the president.
So there's a restriction on what you can say?
There is for people in the military.
Opinion?
Yeah, there is for people in the military, Gina.
That sounds kind of stupid. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and thank goodness the rest of us don't have those restrictions yet. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I highly encourage people to exercise their right to free expression and free thought and to talk about these and other issues. We need to do it every day so that we don't lose those rights.
Thank you, Gina, for your call, and thanks for finding the program. I hope you'll listen every day. Charles in Florida, you're on the air.
Yes. I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak here and give our opinion of things and have an outlet. I would like to ask you, it seems like that this administration is attacking the very foundation of our nation. I mean, our gun laws, abortion, same-sex marriage, even in the military, our national debt. I mean, every avenue, it'd be like, to me, like 9/11 flying those planes into the trade towers. And my question is, I guess, is if we know all these things, we see all these things, is there anything that could be done? Is an impeachment possible, or is it does he have too many of his cronies, so to speak, that it can't be done? I mean, it seems like he is just as strategically pulling our nation to the ground.
Floyd, you've been down this path before.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult to impeach him. I mean, he has all of the resources of government at his disposal. The U.S. Senate, which would have to vote to convict him if he was impeached by the House, is clearly in strong Democrat hands and liberal hands. So, is there anything we can do to control him? We need the members of Congress, we need the Speaker of the House to stand up to him because they control the purse strings. But, they haven't been willing to fight him in very significant ways. They fight him in small ways, this sequestration, which really is just, fractions of a dollar. But we haven't seen, any of his major initiatives like Obamacare be defunded. I mean, the House of Representatives, which is controlled by Republicans, could defund Obamacare, but they choose not to. Instead, they pass these continuing resolutions that continue to fund things like Obamacare and make no real changes.
So, is there? I mean, I know, and I believe that prayer is our weapon and everything to hear, but it doesn't seem like we have much going for us as far as help from within our own country, our own government.
No, but we have help from above.
Amen.
So that's
amen.
In my Bible, we win in the end, so that's why we're victorious.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate your call. And we have a break here upon us. We'll come back to more of your calls here in our final segment. You're listening to Crosstalk. Floyd Brown is our guest today here on Crosstalk. Their website, westernjournalism.com. We'll be right back.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Today I begin a series on money and a biblical worldview. John MacArthur had a great comment about money and a biblical worldview, and he said 16 out of the 38 parables Jesus gave that are recorded in the New Testament deal with money. 16 out of 38. In fact, more is said in the New Testament about money than heaven and hell combined. 5 times more is said about money than prayer. There are about 500 verses or so on prayer and faith. There are 2,000 on dealing with money and possessions. Dr. MacArthur so rightly says, the Christianity that doesn't affect how you feel about money and how you handle money is not a biblical Christianity. Let's go back to the Bible and have a biblical worldview for money so we can be a blessing to others, further the gospel, and provide for our family. And over the next few weeks, we'll look at 20 principles for having a biblical worldview with money. For the Worldview Week in Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website, worldviewweekend.com.
You're listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America, talking about the sequester here. White House tours arranged by Congress halted, but the White House arranged Easter egg roll still on. John Kerry saying that he's carrying out President Obama's foreign policy. These are the issues that are before us right now, and certainly, and at the same time, I understand that they're looking at $36 billion of military hardware in Afghanistan could be either destroyed or left behind. This amazing, Floyd.
It is amazing, and of course, there was a snowstorm in Washington today, so federal workers took the day off paid.
Wow.
Okay. If there was a real budget crisis, they would be dealing with it the way that a business or a family would deal with it, and that is you cut where you have the least impact, and instead they've been trying to create the most impact on the American people, and that's really wrong.
We want America to feel the pain. Okay, let's go to Pensacola, Florida. Michael, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I'll ask a question. When this money the contract was signed for each to get these tanks and planes and whatever, do you have to know what year it was signed and what president signed it, or Congress or whoever?
I know that was several years back when there was a total different leadership in Egypt. For some reason, Floyd, they felt necessary to follow through with a brand new Muslim Brotherhood-controlled regime.
Yeah, I think that's the big issue. I don't think we should ever give American money to regimes that are burning the American flag. And yet this administration thinks it's perfectly all right to give money to a regime like Egypt that is doing just that. It's being led by the Muslim Brotherhood, which has made it a routine at their protests to burn the American flag.
Well, my point is, who made the deal to sell weapons to Egypt? What was that contract?
Well, I think they have been giving weapons to Egypt for a long time as part of the Arab-Israeli peace process. The problem is now when you have an Egyptian regime that's not interested in peace and potentially could end up going to war with Israel, we shouldn't still be arming them.
Thanks for the call to Mobile, Alabama. Herbert, you're on the air.
Yes, I listen to you almost every day, and I've been listening to some of the things that, the things you've been saying. I would just like to kind of caution you all. Now, I know we have freedom of speech and all of that, but when you say that you are a Christian, now that's when I have to kind of draw the line at some of the things that you all are saying here. I mean,
let's get specific here today, if you would, Herbert. What today have you heard that is not truthful?
Well, even if it's flippant, like this thing about Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama didn't fly anywhere. That thing was taped in Washington, and she didn't do that on the taxpayers' money. I mean, if you're going to tell something, tell about who got us into this mess, how this country got into this mess as it is, and that was under President Bush administration. Now, you cannot dig this country out of the hole that it's in, that it took 8 years to get us into.
Okay, your comment here, Floyd.
Well, I'll tell you, the economy was doing better under George W. Bush than it is now. And we have dug the hole deeper. We have higher unemployment. They've changed the way they actually even register unemployment because, they wanted to, I believe, artificially lower the unemployment numbers. There is real economic hardship, more economic hardship now than there was under the Bush administration by almost all objective measures of economic performance. So, for the first time since 1959, real income of Americans, their take-home pay has gone down. And with this last tax bill that came on the fiscal cliff deal, and I don't just point at Democrats. This includes Republicans because they were part of this tax increase deal. Why they stood in Washington and they all said, this is going to affect the richest of the rich, people that make over $400,000, yada, yada, yada. The single income that had the greatest percentage loss of income from the tax increase was people making $30,000 a year. Now, I don't care if you're John Boehner or Barack Obama. When you tell the American people it's only going to affect the rich, you're lying to them.
It hadn't affected me, and I make that much.
So your paycheck hasn't gone down at least 2% because of the payroll tax increase?
Your paycheck didn't go down this year, Herbert?
No, and I'm self-employed. But
if you're self-employed, that's different because the truth is that employees, they all got a 2% increase in their payroll tax deduction, and that is on the first dollar of income for everybody. And to stand in Washington and say it only affects the rich was an absolute bald-faced lie, and they told it on both sides of the political divide.
Let's go to Ken in Utica, New York. You're on the air, Ken.
How you doing?
Fine. Now, we were just about out of time. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, I just want to say that I do not like computers very well, and so I have nothing to do with computers at all. And I have call intercept on my phone, and so I just want to say in closing that if I keep out of the computers, then they won't have. They might have my medical information, but that's about it.
Well, do you shop at Costco or Walmart?
Nope.
Okay, well then, if you shop at small firms that don't, capture this information, if you don't use credit cards, if you don't use computers, then you're off the grid with everything except for your medical records, if you go to the doctor, are going to end up on a computer somewhere.
And tax records and et cetera.
Yeah, tax records too. So you probably pay taxes.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate your call. We are out of time on the program. Floyd Brown has been our guest here today on Crosstalk from the Western Center for Journalism. And give us that website again where our listeners can get those email alerts.
westernjournalism.com.
Great. Well, Floyd, thank you for carving some time out of your schedule today to join us on Crosstalk.
Great to be with you, Jim.
And folks, thanks for joining us every Monday through Friday as we deal with the issues on Crosstalk. Thanks for joining us. Have a good afternoon.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.